Welcome to Voice of the Vatican, our top stories. Pilgrimage Friends. The organization UNITALSI exists to assist and accompany the disabled to Catholic pilgrimage sites like Lourdes. Stargazing. On the night of the Feast of St. Lawrence, Italians traditionally turn their gaze to the heavens in the hopes of catching sight of shooting stars. Modeling mercy. In Malawi, Catholic parliamentarians make donations to an orphanage to mark the Year of Mercy. Consoling the lonely. Italian police answer an emergency call and find an elderly couple who needs them, but for an unexpected reason. Message of hope. The Holy Father sends a message of consolation to those in Mexico suffering after the devastation of Hurricane Earle. Peace Days. On the anniversaries of the atomic bombs unleashed on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan remembers by celebrating 10 days for peace. Voting dilemmas. What to do if your political candidate is inconsistent on the issue of life? We'll speak to ethicist Father Robert Gall for some advice. Celebrating service. An Italian priest celebrates 74 years of priestly ministry, including 48,000 masses celebrated and a life that has spanned 9 papacies. Way of mercy. In Australia, the relics of 2 beloved holy women are making their way across the Blue Mountains, accompanied by a cross of mercy. I'm Ashley Nerona in Rome, Italy, and you're watching Voice of the Vatican, only on Shalom World TV. They strive to bring hope where there's despair and a smile where there's sadness. The mission of UNITALSI was built on the desire to help the disabled and those in need to live the gospel in everyday life. And they've been doing that for 113 years. It was back in 1903 that UNITALSI began with the goal to share pilgrimage experiences with those who otherwise wouldn't have had that chance.
UNITALSI is an ecclesial association founded in Rome when a man named Giovanni Battista Tomasi went on a pilgrimage to Lourdes. He was in his 20s and had a severe form of advanced arthritis that restricted him to a wheelchair. He went to Lourdes just to prove that the hype around the shrine was fake and was just made up by the church. He planned to go there and then to kill himself. Instead, when he arrived at Lourdes, he had a spiritual transformation. After that, he sought advice from a bishop. It was Bishop Angelo Roncalli, who would later become Pope John XXIII. And when he told the bishop that he had originally been planning to take his own life, the bishop remarked, "Instead, the Madonna had won." Tomasi returned healed, not only physically but also spiritually. He then thought, if Lourdes helped me, I know it can help so many others. And thus he began UNITALSI to make it possible to take the disabled on pilgrimages to Lourdes. His act of despair turned into an act of hope.
Since then, UNITALSI's 100,000 volunteers across Italy have been helping the disabled by accompanying them on spiritual pilgrimages, hosting activities, helping with shopping, offering pickups and drop-offs, and they also have a presence in St. Peter's Square during every papal event to offer help to any disabled visitors. Voice of the Vatican spoke to Mirella Rossi after she had the blessing of making a pilgrimage to Lourdes thanks to UNITALSI.
It was an impressive experience. I wasn't really expecting what awaited me, and I wasn't expecting my deep reaction to it. And when I took a bath in those cold waters of Lourdes and came out almost dry, it was incredible. I'll never forget what it meant to me, and I want to go back every year.
One volunteer told Voice of the Vatican that he made a choice to volunteer from the age of 18 because he gets far more from the experience than he gives.
It's an experience of service, but also an experience of faith. For the past 17 years, I have been able to give a spiritual and moral service to the needy. This has been my simple and humble contribution. And through that, I have been able to understand the true meaning of mercy so much more clearly. Those you help think that you are giving to them, but they are actually giving to you.
As in the words of Pope Francis at this week's Wednesday public audience, may the divine mercy which we have received pass from our hearts to our hands and find expression in our practice of the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Each year, on the night of August 10th, the feast of St. Lawrence, Italians turn their gaze towards the heavens and wait for what they call the tears of St. Lawrence. The tears are actually from the Perseids meteor shower associated with the comet Swift-Tuttle. The meteor shower begins annually in mid-July with the greatest activity from the 8th of August through the 14th. Knowledge of the meteor shower dates back as far as 36 AD and is recorded in Chinese annals. In the 1860s, the link between the meteor shower and the Swift-Tuttle comet was discovered by the Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli. And since the feast day of the great deacon, St. Lawrence, falls on August 10th, right in the middle of the heavenly action, local tradition began which referred to the meteors as the saint's tears. According to NASA, this year's meteor light show is especially dazzling. Here in Italy, many annual festivals are celebrated in conjunction with the spectacular phenomenon and feast day of the great saint. St. Lawrence lived in the 3rd century and was made an archdeacon by Pope Sixtus II and put in charge of the accounting and distribution of the church's charitable goods to the poor. He's also said to have evangelized many through his great sense of humor. In the year 258, when the Pope was celebrating Mass with his 4 deacons at the catacombs of St. Callistus, soldiers came in and executed the Pope, along with the 3 deacons, but spared Deacon Lawrence, giving him 3 days to turn over the treasures of the church to them. After 3 days, the soldiers returned, and Lawrence pointed to the poor, crippled, and sick, saying, "These are the treasures, the pearls and jewels of the church." The prefect was furious and had Lawrence martyred by being roasted on a grill. Lawrence showed his great sense of humor even in the midst of suffering, telling his executioner, "I think I'm done on this side. You may turn me over now." At his execution, St. Lawrence prayed that the city of Rome might be converted to Christ and that the Catholic faith might spread all over the world. We echo his prayer, and that just like the dazzling lights of the shooting stars, we too may be lights of Christ to the world. In Malawi, even politicians are getting in the spirit of the Year of Mercy. Catholic members of Parliament came together to make a special donation to an orphanage run by Mother Teresa's sisters, the Missionaries of Charity in Kwale. The leader of the Catholic community in the Malawi National Assembly, Francis Kasalai, said that since the Universal Church is celebrating the Year of Mercy, the Catholic community at Parliament wanted to do something to help those in need, and after consulting their chaplain, they chose the orphanage to give to. In a statement, they remarked, "This is just a small donation. Of course, otherwise we know that these sisters need a lot of support from well-wishers and people of goodwill. They need quite a lot in order to care for these children." This action serves as an example to politicians around the world to live their faith at all times. Police in Rome responded to a call from a neighbor who heard cries of anguish coming from the apartment of his elderly neighbors. Fearing that the couple were victims of a burglary, police rushed over, only to find 84-year-old Jolie and her 94-year-old husband Michele alone. They explained to police that they had been watching the TV news and became completely disheartened after hearing horrific stories of terrorist attacks and another on child abuse. The cries that their neighbor heard were their cries of sadness and despair. The couple was actually quite pleased to see the police officers, as they said that no one had visited them for months. The officers wrote on Facebook, "Jolie and Michele were not victims of a scam as often happens to the elderly, and there was no burglary. But on this occasion, we had a more difficult task to perform. These were 2 lonely souls who needed reassuring." So the officers leapt into action and prepared a pasta dinner for the couple, who celebrate their 70th anniversary of marriage this year. "Jolie and Michele love each other," the police wrote. "But when loneliness burdens the heart, you lose hope. The TV kept them company, but they wondered why there's so much wickedness in the world." The four officers, Andrea, Alessandro, Ernesto, and Mirko, posted the story on social media that went viral, touching hearts with this poignant example of God's mercy in action. The Holy Father has sent a message of condolences and support for the victims of Hurricane Earle in Central America. Hurricane Earle is estimated to have caused damages in excess of $50 million and left at least 13 people dead in the Dominican Republic and at least 45 others in Mexico. Veracruz and Puebla are the most affected areas. A telegram signed by Vatican Secretary of State Pietro Parolin read, "The Holy Father expresses his affection for the beloved Mexican people, offering his prayers for those who lost their lives and desiring to show his closeness to their families and the victims." At the same time, His Holiness asks the Lord to sustain the will of the authorities and people of Mexico and to awaken in all a spirit of solidarity. Bishop Patiño Leal of the Diocese of Córdoba said the Diocesan Caritas has intervened to give all the aid it can. Priests of the diocese have been asked to open church doors and accommodate the homeless inside of churches. We bear in mind the words of Psalm 34:18. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. It was 71 years ago this week that the U.S. dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, eventually killing about 140,000 people out of the 350,000 who lived in that city. 3 days later, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. And there at ground zero of the tragedy, Pope St. John Paul II made a famous appeal for peace on February 25th of 1981. And in response, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Japan designated the days from August 6th to 15th as 10 days for peace. This year marks the 35th commemoration of those 10 days for peace. And while standing before the memorial in Hiroshima's Peace Park, near the epicenter of the blast, Pope John Paul II said in 1981, "To remember Hiroshima is to abhor nuclear war. To remember Hiroshima is to commit oneself to peace." He then called the world to make a moral about-face and embark upon the steep and difficult task of peace, that peace that can come only from God. With the elections in the U.S. quickly approaching, many Voice of the Vatican viewers have wondered about how to understand politicians whose stances that are contrary to the moral teachings of the Church, especially on the issue of life. We spoke to ethics professor Father Robert Gall for advice.
What the politician says about their position regarding human life is very indicative of their character, because principles shape character. And if someone is willing to instrumentalize little human beings for the sake of political convenience, it tells us a lot about how they'll treat the rest of us.
Another problem arises when politicians say they are personally against abortion, but don't vote that way or make exceptions to that.
Given that all human life should be protected no matter what, to speak morally about exceptions to the prohibition of abortion is kind of absurd. Why? It's not a baby's fault if the baby was conceived due to violence of an aggressor in the case of a rapist. It would be harming the mother again, twice over, to have her commit this violence against her own child, even if she's confused at the moment. Later on, it would be a disappointment for her. Later on, it would be a great satisfaction for her to realize that she didn't respond with evil to evil, but she was able to overcome evil with her love, which is exactly what Jesus teaches us from the cross, that we can overcome evil with love.
Father Gall also points out the opportunity that exists for us as Catholics to reach out and help women who are struggling.
We should think about what we can do to help that woman. Oftentimes it involves emotional care. Oftentimes it involves instruction. Sometimes it requires offering economic help. Sometimes it entails offering help for her to complete her schooling, her education. And there may be a kind of accompaniment in school or a kind of tutoring situation that can be done in order to help a woman avoid, let's say, the temptation of having an abortion.
In his recent apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis said, "Family is the sanctuary of life, the place where life is conceived and cared for. It is a horrendous contradiction when it becomes a place where life is rejected and destroyed." His name is Father Alessandro De Sanctis, and his parishioners in the town of Filetino, Italy have lots to celebrate. This week, Father De Sanctis celebrated 74 years of priesthood, and since 1942, he's spent all of those years serving the same parish. His 98 years of life have spanned 9 pontificates, and during that time, he's met 7 popes. He said one of his greatest memories was meeting Pope Benedict XVI 7 years ago at his residence in Castel Gandolfo. During his 74 years of priestly ministry, he celebrated approximately 1,500 funerals and 48,000 masses. He's also known for his sense of humor, and even for the sign he hung outside of his church, asking parishioners to turn off their mobile phones during the Mass, adding, "The Lord will never call you on your cell." 2 years ago, on January 8th, 2014, he had the honor of a special meeting with Pope Francis. The priest said that he couldn't wait to speak to this Pope of Charity, which he added, as emphasized by St. Paul, is the greatest of all virtues. When Pope Francis was informed of the age of the priest, the pontiff joked, "Where do you hide those years?" and followed that with the words, "Holy man, pray for me." On the occasion of his 70th Jubilee, the parishioners had a bell dedicated to him and installed it in the parish bell tower. And this year they opened a parish museum bearing his name. Father Alessandro will turn 99 in December, and when he thinks about his 100th year and 75th anniversary of priesthood, said, "I hope to be even better, to continue to lead the community that the Lord has entrusted to me." As Pope John Paul II said in 1979, "No one can see Christ, but everyone sees the priest. And through him they wish to catch a glimpse of the Lord. Immense is the grandeur of the Lord. Immense is the grandeur and dignity of the priest." Coming up next, we'll go up close with Invictus Christus, who took Christ to the streets, where hundreds of men joined in a Eucharistic procession to demonstrate their love for the Lord.
Media is powerful. It can change a culture. It can change a whole generation. It can impact the entire globe. 2 years ago, Shalom World TV was a dream. Today, it's a reality. A commercial-free, high-definition television network broadcasting from the United States of America, reaching 375 million English-speaking people around the globe. We want to reach to the ends of the earth. Throughout the year, Shalom missionaries work day and night to accomplish this mission, to produce programs that evangelize the culture.
What is wrong with contraception?
Tonight on Seekers.
I can make time for you.
For divine knowledge. We want to continue this mission. We want to produce more programs to impact this generation positively. Will you be with us? Can you take a commitment of donating just $25 a month for the next 12 months? We assure you of our prayers. Visit shalomworld.org/donate today. We thank you for your generosity.
More headline news. This week, relics of St. Mary MacKillop and Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta began a 3-month journey through the Diocese of Parramatta through Western Sydney and the Blue Mountains. The relics are accompanied by a 3.7-meter-high wooden mercy cross, and the journey is being called the Way of Mercy. It was launched by the Bishop of Parramatta, the Most Reverend Vincent Long. The festivities began with a procession around Prince Alfred Square, in which participants sang and stopped for prayer and reflection on creation, peace, and mercy. Representatives from 47 Catholic parishes across Western Sydney and the Blue Mountains were present, along with 500 students from 5 Catholic schools. The Diocese of Parramatta is the 5th largest Catholic diocese in Australia. It hosts 47 parishes and churches, educates more than 45,000 students across its 83 schools, and employs more than 5,000 staff, and cares for thousands of people in need through its social services arm, Catholic Care Social Services. St. Mary of the Cross MacKillop is the patron of the Diocese of Parramatta. And following her canonization in 2010, the Sisters of St. Joseph gave the diocese a special relic, a strand of Mary's hair. The relics of Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta are a card and letter she wrote in 1986 to the students of Gilroy Catholic College in Castle Hill, New South Wales, Australia. Mother Teresa will be canonized on the 4th of September this year at the Vatican. And let us take this opportunity to reflect on the words of St. Mary MacKillop. Whatever troubles may be before you, accept them bravely, remembering whom you are trying to follow. Do not be afraid. Love one another, bear with one another, and let charity guide you all your life. God will reward you as only He can. The unconquerable Christ. That's what their name Invictus Christus means, and their objective is to inspire men to attain heroic virtue and bold leadership. They are a lay Catholic men's leadership apostolate that seeks to raise up, train up, and build up the next generation of heroic Catholic leaders. How do they do it? They set out to strengthen men not only for temporal battle, but for the spiritual battle. And they recently led a 650-man-strong Eucharistic procession and spoke to Voice of the Vatican about the impact.
Every one of these men were completely captivated, like I've never seen before. They were just waiting to be, they anticipated that something was going to be set on fire at that moment. And so when that first engagement happened, where the Lord was brought out and the proclamation was made, an exhortation was made, you could see that it was like a wave that was falling over these men. And one of the powerful things to see in regards to this procession, I think speaks a lot, is we had people walking on this procession that were in walkers, we had wheelchairs, we had people, 85, 80-year-old men, walking or whatever.
Dads carrying their babies.
Yeah, that young
kids.
Yeah, young kids. And so the point being is every man there was ready to give everything that he had in order to fulfill that call. And I think that needs to resonate strongly within men in general. God is calling you to give everything you have. There is no half measure with God.
The Eucharistic procession was called Christ in the Streets and covered 2.5 miles. It was done for the intentions of reparation and mercy.
So the procession itself drew out of this sense of the fact that there was a need that was actually needed to be met in regards to the men being able to really make that first step out into the world and really become active evangelizers and actively bringing Christ forward. And that need was the need for reparation to be made. For us to take full ownership of those times when we have not been the men that God has called us to be, and to recognize that in taking ownership of that in fact is our first acknowledgement of the fact that we really are making a declaration to really follow Christ.
As far as spiritual warfare, there are no two things more powerful than Jesus Christ in the presence of the Eucharist, combined with humility in reparation.
As the procession passed through the town of Royal Oak, Michigan, passers-by were curious. Some were touched, and some even stopped to kneel and adore Christ who was passing by.
We are made perfect not by ourselves, but by Him. That we need to bring Him out first, and that He needs to lead us into regards to converting the world or creating conversion within those around us. That Christ Himself must go first.
Many participants said they felt inspired by the experience, energized and motivated to live their faith in a more full and outward manner, and to strive to be true men of Christ.
I love processions. I hope and pray that there'll be many more of them. My mom always told me about them when I was growing up as a little girl, but I never had an opportunity to see or be involved in a procession. So experiencing this is especially dear to my heart today. I'm really grateful.
If you're going to do spiritual warfare, you have to do it for real. You have to play to win, and winning in this realm is winning souls.
As in the example of St. Joseph, may all ordinary men strive to do extraordinary things by fighting the good fight and surrendering everything over to Christ. This week's Tweet of the Week comes to us from Father Brad Sweet, who, in honor of her feast day, shared a quote from St. Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, also known as Edith Stein. The love of Christ knows no limits. It never ends. It does not shrink from ugliness and filth. Edith Stein was born in 1891 in Poland, the youngest of 11 children in a Jewish family. She had a thirst for learning, and through her doctoral studies of philosophy and phenomenology, she became enamored of the Catholic faith. After reading a book by St. Teresa of Avila, she was baptized at the cathedral in Cologne, Germany, at the age of 31. 11 years later, she entered the Carmelites in Cologne. She took the name Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, and on Easter Sunday of 1935 made her final vows. When the Nazi persecution of Jews in Germany increased, she received permission to transfer. And on the night of December 31st of 1938, she secretly crossed the border into Holland, where she was warmly received into the Carmel of Echt. When the Nazis invaded neutral Holland and the Dutch bishops issued a pastoral letter protesting the deportation of the Jews and the expulsion of Jewish children from the Catholic school system, the Nazis then arrested all Catholics of Jewish extraction in Holland. Teresa was arrested, and with her sister Rose, sent to the extermination camp at Auschwitz. Teresa died in the gas chambers of Auschwitz in 1942 at the age of 51. Yet in the midst of unspeakable human suffering, there blossomed a beautiful life of dedication, consecration, prayer, fasting, writing, and penance. She was canonized on October 11th of 1998 and is renowned as a profound philosopher and brilliant writer, and had a great influence on the women of her time and continues to be influential today in intellectual and philosophical circles. During the Great Jubilee of the year 2000, Pope John Paul II named her a co-patron of Europe for the new millennium. As her feast day passes, let us remember the words of Edith Stein. One can only learn the science of the cross by feeling the cross in one's own person. All week long, you can keep up with the latest happenings in Rome on our Twitter feed, which is @VoiceOfVatican. And be sure to like us on Facebook on our Voice of the Vatican page. Keep checking our social media feeds for breaking news and information about upcoming guests and features. And we want to hear your voice too. Email your questions and stories to us at vov@shalomworld.org. This is Ashley Nerona, and on behalf of the entire staff and crew of Voice of the Vatican, I wish you a blessed week and blessed feast of the Assumption. May God bless you and your family. Saying ciao for now from the Eternal City, I'll see you next week on Voice of the Vatican, only on Shalom World TV, bringing Rome to your home.